We're talking all about a subject that is brand new to me, the GRE. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Break into Law School. I'm your host, LoVetta Jenkins. I'm joined today by Colby Carter. He works with ETS.org, and he is the Associate Director of Global Higher Education. Welcome, Colby. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
All right, so I know very little about certain tests and fields of that nature, but you have a very interesting background. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you actually got into this side of law.
I started out, I actually grew up in Washington State in a very rural area, and I just knew that I needed to get away. So I went to Southern California for college, and I thought I wanted to do business. And then after kind of seeing that scene, it was too much for me. It wasn't really fitting my style. So at the university that I graduated from, I actually got a job at their law school. So I was working in their admissions office for almost 2 years, and I realized that I loved it. I found that, they were paying people to travel, go to all the different universities, talk to people about enrolling in school. They're passionate about law school. So I worked with one of my mentors, and they knew of an opening in New York. So I ended up just interviewing, getting the job, and moving to New York in like my mid 20s, which was perfect and amazing. But then I just had this draw to get back to California to where all of my college friends were, get a little bit closer to the family. So I did move back to the West Coast, and I was there for about 7 years, working at a law school as well before I started to transition into working with all of the law schools. And that's when I moved to the Philadelphia area, probably around 2015, so about 9 years ago. And that's when I've been working on the test assessment side and helping the law schools figure out what they need, how we can help them, if we can join them in any sessions and help give them the knowledge about the GRE test and how best to kind of utilize it as well as their applicants.
Okay, and that's what I want to know a little bit more about. You work for a company called ETS that has been very, very influential with a GRE. Explain to me as a layperson what the GRE is and how it's beneficial.
So the GRE is the graduate record examination. It's a standardized test commonly used for admissions for graduate programs in the field of studies like education, engineering, etc. A while back, it started moving into the business schools. The MBAs started accepting it. As part of the application process. And then in February of 2016, the University of Arizona was the first law school to get approval from the American Bar Association to utilize the GRE in lieu of the LSAT as part of their application process. So it's slowly been growing. It obviously hasn't been in the law school arena that long, but the recent trends for law school admissions and the GRE have been increasing. We have right now about 109 ABA law schools that are accepting the GRE, with a couple more working to get on board and get on the list on our website. That seems to be a lengthy process, but then again, anytime working with universities, there are a lot of hoops we all have to jump through. And the test itself really just has like three sections that's focusing on the analytical skills, the analytical writing, there's verbal reasoning, and the quantitative reasoning. So we did also just shorten the test this starting last September, almost a year ago. And so it went from almost 4 hours down to under 2 hours. So now we only have one essay question where we ask them to analyze an issue. And then we have two sections of verbal reasoning and two sections of quantitative reasoning, which are also adaptive. So after the test taker takes the first section of the verbal reasoning and the quantitative reasoning, depending on how well they do, the next section will have a harder, the same, or an easier section that they can go through to help us with their final scoring.
That sounds really good. I like the fact that you cut that down in time by half, because test taking is already a little bit of a stressor for a lot of people, but a long test, it's got to be like almost unbearable. Can you identify any specific skills or attributes that the GRE measures and how they might relate in relation to success in legal studies?
So the GRE really just tries to focus more on the readiness of students or applicants, candidates. And by going through the sections, it shows more of if they're ready, willing and ready to enter into law school and follow through with those 3 years. They are 3 long, arduous years, and it does take a lot of effort for students. And we just want to make sure that by taking the test, it gives them a little bit more flexibility on when they can take it, how they take it, and getting their scores back to be able to see if they feel ready to take the next step to either apply or even if they apply to actually enroll into the program.
I know test taking, especially something of this magnitude, can be a little bit daunting, but I know that you've said you've had success with other universities. Can you discuss any of those past experiences where you've successfully collaborated with educational institutions to improve their assessment tools? Because there's a lot out there, but I know the GRE can help improve on some things, right?
Yes. So, what's been interesting is always working with people and any kind of new product and showing how it relates to their specific situation. So, a while ago, right after Arizona accepted the GRE, we did a national report with 21 total schools where we utilized their law students and had them take the GRE. And then we did a validity study to see how that related to their first year law grades. And so that helped with giving us more data on the different sections in the GRE and how they apply to that specific law school's first year grades. And so some schools have found that the quantitative score is more relatable to their first year grades or has a stronger indicator than the verbal or maybe the analytical writing. But across the board, the law schools have really liked the analytical writing portion because we do score it. And we have samples online where we go through like a sample question, a sample response, and we'll show the review committees how it's scored. So this is what we're looking for when a person gets a 6, a 5.5, and we break it down all the way to 0 because it is scored from 0 to 6 in half point increments. And so we will walk through each different scoring section for that. And so that's how we kind of leverage the writing portion. As far as the verbal and the quantitative, it's going to depend, like I said, on the schools and what they find valuable for their educational purposes and how their students succeed. And some may put the same weight on both the verbal and the quantitative, or they might kind of give more to the verbal. So it depends on the school. And of course, the undergraduate GPA and the major that the person's in.
There's a lot of factors going on there, but you mentioned looking at things online now with the increase of the use of technology in education, because we can't get away from it, it's everywhere. How do you envision the role of technology in the admission or in the administration of the GRE for law school admissions?
So currently, we definitely, for our analytical writing portion, we do use like AI to help score that section. But we also have a person evaluate it and score it as well. And those two scores are kind of combined for their final. But if there is a large enough discrepancy, what we'll do is throw out the AI score, give it to a second person to review, and then average those two. But I mean, the percentage that we do that, I think it's under like 1%. So the technology has been getting really, really great with kind of looking for or finding the things that we're looking to grade on. As far as the other portion, it's all just it's multiple choice. And so they just go through, they get their unofficial score after they complete the test. And the unofficial score is just for their verbal and quantitative because that analytical writing piece does need to be analyzed. But hopefully, with technology and AI, we can help automate the process. The students or test takers sending their scores to law school. So right now, the person will say, I want to send it to school A, and then we'll load the score report into that school's portal. But we need to make it a little more seamless into getting it into their review process. So if they're using a CRM or a specific one that we haven't integrated with, hopefully that it'll help get that information to them quicker.
I like that. It's a little speedy. So you've cut the test time in half and you sped up the process of how to get the scores out. But another question, especially, with all the online stuff and how hacking goes, are you taking any measures to ensure security and integrity with the test, especially with the online testing?
We are. So we utilize ProctorU, and that also utilizes AI as well as live proctors. And they go through the basic security checks, validating their ID, that the room that they're in doesn't have any additional notes or any other devices that they could use for cheating. And then also there's a scan going on to make sure that there's no software on the computer that they're taking that could allow for cheating or additional help. Sometimes that evaluation doesn't get caught instantly, like as they're taking the test, because if it does, it'll just automatically shut down. And then we'll work with that person to see what was the actual issue. Was it software they weren't supposed to have? Do we need to just reschedule? Or is it an official cancellation, and then we work through that process with them. But sometimes the scanning takes a little bit longer, and that's also why we have a little bit of a leadway before we send out the official scores, so that if something is caught within that time, we'll reach out to the test taker and let them know we found this on your computer, we're canceling the score. Please let us know if it's a mistake or you want to talk to us about it, and then we'd go through that process.
I love the fact that you just offer them an appeal process. So many times, there'll be a situation where something is kind of off and it gets wonky with the AI, but there's nobody to kind of talk to about it if something's wrong. Now, because every student is different and every single student learns different, and, they might have, test anxiety, things of that nature, what students do you think the GRE is best for when it comes to law school admissions?
Um, so usually how I try and advise people is they, like you said, each test taker, student, person is different. And when applying to law school, they are the ones that are in charge of putting their best foot forward. Everything in their personal statement should be, positive or have that information that they want to share so the committee can get a better picture of who that person is. And I think that's the same way with any kind of assessment that students should look at taking. Go take a practice test. All of the assessments out there that I know of have free practice tests. See how it feels to you, kind of look at that unofficial score. And I mean, if you're comparing it with your scores on the other free tests, don't just look at the scores and see which ones are higher. Look inside and see which one do you think you can actually excel more with, because sometimes we just haven't brushed up on a certain section, and if we spend an extra couple hours there, then we'll excel in that area, whereas the one that we might have done better at, we could just plateau, right? That could just be the best, our top, without putting in like months of additional study time. So take the free tests. You can never go wrong with free. And then just do kind of like an internal analysis to see, does this test fit me and my strengths? And if it does, I would say move forward with that, because most of the time you only want to take the assessment once. The assessments aren't cheap. They take up a lot of your time. You got to find time to study, you got to find time to take the test, you need a quiet space. Sometimes I also advise people when they're studying, maybe go to a coffee shop or some place that's kind of busy with extra noise, because you never know what's going to happen during that time that you take the actual test. I've had people that have taken the exam and there was some kind of like party or whatever going on next door, and it just threw them off their game because they were always in a quiet place. So things happen and you can't prepare for everything, but you can try.
I like that you said you can't prepare for everything, but you can try. And I think that leaves a little bit more for preparedness, not just being in a quiet environment all the time. Sometimes you do need a little bit of a distraction going on just so that you can maintain your focus. Because if it's always quiet, of course you'll be able to focus. But if you got a little bit something going on in the background, somebody else talking, that's when you really find out what your test taking skills or your study skills are made of, in my opinion. So, how would you address like concerns related to diversity and inclusion in the development and administration of GRE, especially in the context of law school admissions?
So with the GRE, one thing that I like, just because it's an additional option for someone. So if law schools are always just looking in one area, they always just have a limited pool. If they decide to be a little more inclusive or open to other options, they can look over here, which might be the GRE if it fits their institution. And that's a completely different pool from the one that they were previously focusing on. So it's going to add more options for them to increase their applications, increase diversity, just have more opportunities to find that perfect student that fits into their institution.
I love it. I love it. So we did a lot of talking about, the GRE, what it is, how it works for you. And we did touch a little on study tips. Do you have any more maybe in-depth study tips that might be helpful for students?
So there, like I mentioned before, there are a lot of free material out there, especially with the way technology is, websites, Reddit. There's a lot of places that people can go for that free help. So it really depends on the person, what they have available to them, and again, what kind of time crunch are they under. For the GRE, we do have a lot of material. We have books on our website that people can buy if they want, that physical material to work with. We do have GRE Mentor, which is more online. So you just go on, you have different questions for different sections. It feels a lot more like the test itself. And then you can take those tests as well to kind of simulate that test day under those time restraints and go through the whole thing and see how you do, how well you do. With any kind of assessment, the key is time management. It's that time that you have to complete those sections within. That's the hardest piece. Other than that, if some people are lucky enough and financially have the ability to get a private tutor, that would be amazing, because then they can sit down with you and be like, you're really having a hard time in this section. What is it? Let's try and like focus on how you can learn to get over this hurdle. There are also classes that people can sign up for. Some are lengthier, some are shorter. Those also have a cost. A lot of times, those will kind of lead right up to your test date, which is nice. So you can plan your study time and then go right into the test. I know Khan Academy, which is a free resource, has a lot of options there. And then via our website, we do have some videos that people can watch. And also, each month, we've been doing a deep dive. So we have our actual people writing the test questions come online, walk through an example, say why this answer is correct, why these are not the best choices. And then there's also Q&A where you can ask them specifically why or maybe what you don't understand to get feedback from the person that's actually creating those questions.
That I think is probably one of the best things ever. Get feedback from the people creating the question, and that way you'll know exactly what it is they're looking for and exactly how to tailor your answers and what you actually need to be studying. I like that. So, with all of this studying going on, I know there's going to be someone out there who says, "Well, what's the difference between LSAT and GRE and which one do I need to take? Do I take them both?" What do you say to a student like that?
I've so far never advised people to take both because they are different tests and you're going to have to study differently for them or prepare differently for them. So, not only is it going to be an additional cost, but it's going to be additional time. Whereas if you decide that your first score of whichever test you take isn't showing your true capability and you want to retake it, it's easier to brush up on what you already learned or spend more time on that information to kind of excel the next time you take it. I know that with the GRE, after you take the assessment, they do have options for feedback. So you can get a breakdown of what areas you did well in, what areas you did not or may need improvement. And then there are options to kind of get more detailed feedback that has a cost to it. But again, I prefer the free options at first. And so people really need to, tell people when studying, they need to figure out how much time they have available. Because we did a market study with international students and domestic students. And the interesting thing is, both groups put in basically the same amount of time. The international students just compressed it into more around a month, 4 to 6 weeks, whereas the domestic people expanded it, stretched it out over 3 months. So we were seeing international students, as soon as school was done, they'd go home, they'd study for the exam, get in that study time. The domestic students mainly focused on the weekends a little bit more. So that's why it kind of stretched out. But the big thing is time management and figuring out, what's best for you, because you don't want to be taking this test or assessment when you have your finals coming up or any other kind of big events going on.
That's a very good thing you said. And I think it's a running theme, period. You've got to have some good time management if you're going to be preparing for admissions testing and things of that nature. Got to make sure you've got good time management. So any final tips that you would offer to someone who's even thinking about maybe law school is for me?
So thinking about law school in general, there's so many opportunities. Depending on the university or school you're at, typically they will have a pre law advisor, which is an amazing resource. So utilize them. A lot of times, pre law advisors have also gone to law school, but the resources that they have where they know their students have done typically this well on the exam and enrolled at these different programs or institutions, you can kind of get a look at to what other people at your school have kind of done. Sometimes if your university actually has a law school or there's a law school in the area, they'll have open houses, they'll have tours. You can typically sit in on a class. Some things you have to schedule. Sometimes you can just walk in. But I recommend, again, those free resources. Go talk to people, learn. A tip that I have always liked giving people is, you want to always let people know ahead of time you're coming. So, you schedule your tour, you walk around, you get the basic layout. But depending on the school and kind of what's going on, some of them are a little bit more of an open campus, whereas others in big cities are a little more locked down, have security. If they can, I recommend walking around the school without anyone knowing that you're there and see how people interact with you. I mean, do you need kind of like that cutthroat mentality, kind of drive at the school? Are you looking for something where people are a little more open and expressive and will talk with you as you walk around, see if you need anything, your own little tour? So again, just look and use those free resources that are available and keep your options open.
Right. Free resources all around for everybody. Thank you so much for being my guest today, Colby. I have appreciated all of this great knowledge and a newfound appreciation for test taking. Thank you.
This was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.